The Vice President, Kashim Shettima, has reaffirmed the federal government's dedication to advancing gender equity through transformative policies. At a webinar in commemoration of the 109th posthumous birthday of Chief Hannah Idowu Didiolu Awolowo, the Vice President emphasized the indispensable role of women in building a balanced and equitable society. Well, he's also calling for renewed national efforts to create an inclusive society where women are empowered to lead and thrive.
Spearheaded the fight for justice, equality, and recognition in politically hostile times, compelling our society to address the structural inequalities holding women back. Thanks to their efforts, the conversation has expanded beyond suffrage to include workplace equality, reproductive rights, and the fight against domestic violence. These trailblazers also compel us to confront the limitations placed on women and to champion diversity and individualism in the discourse on women's rights, recognizing that each nation's challenges differ. Today, technology has given women unprecedented platforms to amplify their voices and sustain their struggles. From social media movements against gender-based violence to campaigns advocating for education and economic inclusion, Nigerian women have harnessed digital tools to drive change.
I speak before you today, reflecting on the legacy of these two extraordinary individuals. To be their offspring is not just a privilege, it is a profound responsibility. Their legacy is not meant to be confined to history books or family stories. It is a legacy that demands to be shared, understood, and applied in Nigeria and beyond. Their ideals of visionary leadership, equality, and the pursuit of a better society are universal truths that resonate far beyond our borders. We are tasked with carrying forth the torch they lit, ensuring that it burns brightly for generations to come.
We're now joined by Gabriel Aduda, who is the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Women Affairs, here in the studio with us. And also with us is the Deputy Country Director at Action Aid Nigeria, Shuaiba Mohammed Dankabo. And we'll start with Mr. Aduda here in the studio with us. This 16 days of activism against gender-based violence provides that platform for action. But we had the minister talking about sustaining the momentum way after December 10. Just talk us through some of the strategies of the ministry to keep this momentum going way past this 16 days of activism.
Thank you so very much for the invite this evening. Starting with the activities for today and through the 16 days and beyond, basically what we have tried to do at the national level is to domesticate the relevant frameworks and the laws that permits us to build structures around sustaining this fight all through and trying to eliminate in its entirety gender-based violence against women, the girl child, and in some cases the boy child as well. And part of this is the Child Rights Act. As you are aware, as we speak now, we're reviewing the Child Rights Act, which was passed in 2017, and we're trying to make the laws more strict, the provisions more strict, such that it will be able to further bring into the net perpetrators of this very unwholesome act. Next to that is the Violence Against Persons Act, which has now been domesticated by all 36 states of the Federation. So we think that that is a very, very huge plus for us as a nation, because it started at the federal level. Now it is been cascaded down to the states, and of course right down there, because if you are aware, most of these domestic violence and violence against persons takes place oftentimes in rural areas and what have you, especially in the very poor communities. And then next to that, we also have what we call the Women Economic Empowerment Policy, because we believe strongly that a woman that is empowered, a woman that is educated, is less likely to be abused than one that is not. So we're also pushing that policy, which has already taken foot in 16 states. And other states are still being encouraged to latch onto that. So these are some of the things we are putting in place. Then the National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security is also there, which also provides heavily, not only for prevention, but also aftercare. How do we deal with survivors? How do we empower them? How do we get them out of that environment into safe places such that they can live lives afterwards? So these are some of the issues we're putting in place, and we're working in very close collaboration with states and other stakeholders to ensure that we're able to drive this process beyond these 16 days.
Interesting. We'll come back to some of the points that you have raised, but let me bring into this conversation Swaibo at this time. Thank you so much for being on Newsnight. We do appreciate your time. Coincidentally, a UN femicide report released today to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women says home, assumed to be a sanctuary, is the most dangerous place for women. The report also says Africa as a region has the highest number of femicide cases, which increased in the period of last year. Paint to us, how bad is it really in Nigeria? Paint a picture for us what we are dealing with, and how is it that almost 3 decades after, we're still talking about the same issue?
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening, Nigeria. Congratulations, women, for the celebration, the commemoration of the 16 days of activism. We are dealing with complicated situation in the fact that a woman is not secured even within her home. A woman who is exposed, her vulnerability extends beyond the outside to the inside. We are talking about a woman who is not able to attain her potentials because of fear, intimidation, discrimination, and put it all together, death, because some people are after what she has or because of the fact that she is vulnerable. And her vulnerability is rooted in the structural institutions of either culture and tradition or the failure of policies that are supposed to protect her. We are living in days in which a woman is unable to report a case because she fears that her family name is, is exposed, and that she is seen as a betrayer if she exposes the fact that her husband is, is molesting her. Women are living in trauma, and so they're exposed to femicide, which is either acute or chronic. We have seen cases in Nigeria where boyfriends who are supposed to provide love and, and passion and a protection to the girlfriends are killing their girlfriends. We are in a situation today where a woman will jump off the building or fall into the lagoon to kill herself. And so tendencies for suicide and the increasing level of depression is pushing women into different exposure. And this thing is happening, and the problem is the fact that there is no penalty. When penalties are done, it takes a very long time, and then it is we don't see that agility in government to to respond, to prosecute, and to report in public that perpetrators of gender-based violence are punished, and that the punishment could serve as a deterrent to those who intend to do it in the the next time. Imagine the situation in the country where the security of women is no longer there. The number of kidnaps, the number of abductions, and if 2 people are abducted, a man and a woman, she undergoes multiple jeopardies, because apart from the fact that she is going through trauma, she is still subjected to sexual assault. A woman cannot stay in a university and study freely because she's exposed, or she's vulnerable to the threat of the risk of sex for grades. At every point in time, a woman is not protected in the country. You find out that even in the workplace, the woman is not protected. She is afraid. She is not given the right space to exercise her rights. She is not considered in decision-making spaces. And at the end of the day, the increasing level of depression and trauma exposes her to different level of pressure.
If you can hear me quickly, Swaiba, I'll bring in Mr. Aduda back into this conversation in a bit. But I wanted to ask you, because you talked about safe spaces and you've talked about, lack of penalties for perpetrators. The Minister of Women Affairs in Nigeria is talking about life imprisonment for perpetrators. Is that stringent enough? Is that what we need to change the tide and change the narrative very quickly?
See, it's dependent on the capacity of people to report, and the level of the time it takes to bring in justice and to prove is also challenging for the women. And so the policies are good, we appreciate them, but the fact is that the implementation becomes very, very difficult. So while we are happy about the improvement and then the steps that the ministry is taking, we are happy that this minister is coming at a time when the 16 days of activism is here, and then the topic or the theme rightly choosing which is the most relevant for this period, the gender-based violence. If she takes even this one as an agenda that she will drive to conclusion to ensure that every perpetrator is brought to book, executed and presented to the public. Talk about the pedophilias, those who are even molesting young, small children, not even the women, matured women. We have a lot of problems around that area, and if that focus will be to ensure that the policy are reviewed, and apart from the review, they are also implemented to the core.
To bring in Mr. Aduda, talking about the importance of implementation. And it's interesting that Deswa brought up that report, talking about how the home is one of the most unsafe place for women. We remember back in 2019 when we had the COVID pandemic, that was when we had a frightening surge of reported gender-based violence, prompting that state of emergency declaration. Despite this, we have so many systemic challenges that we've been facing, including when it comes to delays in judicial processes. 2 points or 2 questions I'd like to pose to you, Mr. Aduda. What are some of the what are the top challenges or barriers when it comes to implementation? And also, I wanted to talk about some of our cultural practices, right? Like child marriage, female genital mutilation, which sort of perpetuate these sort of violences. What are some things that can be done to mitigate these?
Thank you very much. Starting with what we can do to ensure implementation, I believe that this is where commitment to these laws is on one hand, and then collaboration to ensure that we implement them also comes up. And here we are looking at both the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. The entire justice system has to be in such a way that it is swift and very quick. Because, of course, as it is often said, justice delayed is justice denied. Yeah. And if people can't see that being done, then, of course, the deterrence is not there because people feel they can always do this and get away with it. So it is important that even if government has to pay attention to expediting actions in cases of gender-based violence, we will be able to see some level of deterrence that will now cause people to hold back. That is on one hand. Still paying attention to the family. I think it is extremely important. Thank you for bringing up the issue of the COVID. And then, of course, not only that, recently also, there has been reports of rising cases. I think we should also look at the cases of depression, deepening poverty. And when you have depression, deepening poverty, frustration comes up, and oftentimes that is released in forms of anger, either on the woman or the child. In this case, both the boy child and the girl child are not safe, But more importantly, I think the family unit needs to pay more attention, and that is why we're taking on a very huge portion in awareness. To say that parents need to understand that just as you pay a lot of attention to raising your girl child, you also need to pay attention to raising your boy child as a gentleman and not a monster. And if it begins from home and we're able to couch that and raise children that understand that you just can't raise your hands against another person regardless of the gender and get away with it, then we will have actually make some progress in that area. But more importantly, what we need here is collaboration. At the federal level, between the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, how do we expedite action and how do we ensure rewards and sanctions? It is extremely important. At the family unit, how do we put hands together to ensure that in our schools, we pay a lot of attention to this, creating this awareness, and then be deliberate about educating both the male and the female children to understand that gender-based violence is a no-no, no matter what, and no matter who they are. And then outside of that, how do we now also ensure those of them that have gone through, that are not able to voice out, how do we create a safe environment for them to be able to do so? And having done so, how do we take on survivors? How do we empower them and ensure that we're able to later integrate them into society? So all this is a whole gamut. So we have to look at the entire picture. And that is what the ministry is doing. And that is why we're working from the federal level to the states and right down to ensure that there is a holistic picture. We are also building a very huge database, and not only that, a platform that allows for immediate reporting. We have seen cases where we have had telephone calls that we have actually followed from states. They call us at the Ministry of Women Affairs. We're able to get in touch with the Commissioner for Women Affairs in that state. She gets in touch with the Commissioner of Police in that state, and arrests are made. So we have started that, but what we're trying to do now is to institutionalize that and put it within a framework that gives people available numbers to call just like that, and actions will be taken no matter where they are in country.
One wonders what has happened to our sexual offences register, because that came up a few years back. But let me return to Swaiba. Swaiba, we've talked about safe spaces repeatedly in the course of this conversation. But there's also a conversation that Mr. Aduda has brought up that we're beginning to see in recent times. The menfolk, the boys, some are of the opinion that we have not done enough with the boys. And when we talk about gender-based violence and gender equality, perhaps that is where we are getting it wrong. Do you agree with that? And I also wanted to touch on victim blaming. Regrettably, it's something we have seen around this conversation. Every time we talk about gender-based violence, regrettably, we see victim blaming. How serious is that? And what sort of impact does that have on achieving a less, a better society for our women and our girls to be safer?
I'm happy that the discussion has also brought the fact that most of these things are happening, not that they are happening in the urban areas, but it's also happening deeply rooted in the rural areas where the policies of government are not felt. So the people there are only subjected to the local laws and policies where the traditional council or traditional rulers only have responsibility to touch. So when the permanent secretary is talking about collaboration, this has to start with the alignment with the national policy, government policy, and the traditional policies, so that the actors are not only at the national level or at the ministry level, but also taking into cognizance the role of the traditional system. Because now, if we root it into the education sector, let's assume we want to say, okay, catch them young, bring it into the education system, maybe put it inside a curriculum from primary to secondary school. Education, just like the gender-based violence, are already in a state of emergency in Nigeria. Education is failing in the rural areas. So the best that can happen is the level of awareness and sensitization, and also that penalty, to be sure that whoever attempts it, not even implementing, is given the right kind of treatment. I am wondering how the ministry is collaborating or working together with the National Orientation Agency. And then I'm also wondering what the judicial system is, as we also, at the NGO level, are trying to include the issues of paralegals at the community level, creating this awareness very close to the people. Unless government reactivates the system that works from the national to the state and to the local level, the three tiers of government have to take responsibility and bring the perpetrators to book and make it easier for the victim the survivor to be able to pronounce and report. And when the report is taken, the person is protected. Imagine the psychological trauma that a woman goes through. Apart from the issues of sexual violence, the women are living in trauma. There are some who are into forced marriages, early marriages, that they grow up with pains, and then they are being harassed, and the fact that they are unable to talk leaves them with trauma, and then they are gradually getting into depression. So that is what I call the chronic cause of death. And there are so many women who are into hysteria today. Most of the women that you see on the street, they're not just mad. They are under, they're hysteric. They're having what is called hysteria because they don't have that system, that social system that supports them, feel their pain. When they are being violated, they don't report. When the issues are taken, there are many organizations, or the society, we think this is domestic, so the people do not interfere in domestic issues. But this is not supposed to change, really, because we need to have that safe environment where the women can thrive. The survival system for the women include farming. They produce the significant percentage of the food, almost 60% of the food we have on the table. Now, this is her source of income. She cannot even go to the farm to cultivate because of fear. That fear has led to the decrease in income and increased level of tension in the family. But who bears the brunt is the mother. She feels the pain for herself. She feels the pain for her children. We have heard about cases where some women are taking their children, dropping them away. In FCT here, we are having the issue of infanticide. A lot of issues are happening to the women. There is insecurity. She is exposed to femicide because of her being a woman. Some are killed for rituals. Some are killed for the fact that they cannot, produce male children. Some are killed because they cannot provide they succumb to sexual, relationship that they do not consent to. The death is happening not just physically. There are different forms of death, and so if we say rightly that every 11 minutes or every 10 minutes a woman dies, it's not surprising because many of them are even dying at the point of delivery because there are no gender-responsive services. At the community level, how many women will go to deliver and then they will die because of bleeding?
Unfortunately, Swaibu, we're out of time. It is a serious conversation that we should keep having, even beyond the 16 days of activism, but we must thank you. And, it's refreshing to see that even Mr. Aduda here agrees with most of your points that you're making there, talking about collaboration and beyond that. Gabriel Aduda is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Women Affairs here in Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time on Newsnight. And the Deputy Country Director at Action Aid Nigeria, Swaibu Mohammed Dankabo, thank you very much.